The story begins on a faraway colony where metal towers rise like giant trees and the ground is always covered with dust from the factories. In that place, creatures from across the stars were raised, traded, and trained for different purposes. Some were bred for strength, some for beauty, some for guarding the royal grounds. Among these creatures was a young alien dragon, born inside one of the emperor's special breeding centers. The workers said this dragon was supposed to be perfect like the others, strong and beautiful, with shining scales and powerful wings. But things did not turn out that way. From the moment it hatched, the workers noticed something different. Its horns didn't grow evenly. One curved up while the other twisted to the side. Its scales weren't smooth but rough in some places, as if they had grown in patches. One wing was shaped oddly and had less strength compared to the other. Some workers whispered that it was unlucky. Others said it was simply a failure of nature. None of them gave it a chance to prove what it could do. When the day came for the emperor to inspect the newly grown creatures, everyone stood straight and silent. The emperor walked slowly through the rows, looking at each dragon with sharp, cold eyes. When he reached the rejected dragon, he paused. The creature stood still, trying its best to appear strong, but it had no idea what the emperor really expected. The emperor stared, his face showing no emotion. Then he turned away and waved his hand as if brushing off a small problem. The workers understood what that meant. The dragon was not worthy of the royal program. The decision spread quickly among the workers. They started whispering again, calling the dragon ugly and useless. They said it was better to get rid of it than waste food and space on it. The creature didn't understand their words, but it felt the change in their behavior. They no longer looked at it with interest. They no longer fed it patiently. They didn't even speak softly around it. Instead, they pulled it away roughly from the others and dragged it to a transport vehicle meant for scraps and broken machines. The dragon didn't fight. It simply followed because it had nowhere else to go. It didn't know what it had done wrong. All it knew was that it was being taken away from the only place it had ever known. The workers threw a metal tag on the ground near the creature. On it was written a code meaning discarded. The workers didn't even pick it up again. They just left it there, as if it no longer mattered. The vehicle carried the dragon to a large scrapyard on the edge of the colony. The scrapyard was huge, filled with broken metal pieces, old engines, non-working machines, and parts that had rusted away over the years. The air smelled like burnt wires and old oil. No creature was expected to survive long in such a place. But that was exactly where the workers left the dragon. They opened the rear door and forced it out. Without looking back, they closed the door and drove away, leaving the dragon alone in the middle of the junk. For a long moment, the creature simply stood there. It lifted its head and looked around. The world seemed much bigger and far more dangerous outside the controlled breeding center. The metal piles were shaped strangely, like giant shadows in the dim light. The wind pressed against its weak wing, making it stumble a little. It felt small and scared, but there was no one who cared. The dragon wandered slowly between the broken machines, trying to find a place to hide. It was hungry, but it didn't know how to search for food. It was tired, but the ground was hard and cold. Still, it kept moving because instinct told it to survive. Eventually, it found an old engine shell that had a hollow space inside. It crawled in and curled itself tightly, trying to stay warm. Every sound in the yard made it lift its head. Metal shifting, wind blowing, distant footsteps. But no one came for it. Days passed like this. The creature survived by licking droplets of condensation from metal surfaces and by eating scraps of dried nutrient gel left behind by workers. It grew weaker and thinner. Its injured wing hurt whenever it moved too much. Sometimes it let out a low sound, hoping someone might hear it. But the scrapyard was a forgotten place. No one visited except at random hours when workers dumped more broken machines. One evening, while the sky was dim and the yard was quiet, the creature heard something different. A soft clank of tools, a human voice humming to itself. The dragon peeked out from under the engine shell. The sound grew clearer. Someone was nearby. Someone new. A human mechanic. The mechanic wasn't supposed to be there at that hour. He worked in a workshop not far from the scrapyard and often came to look for old parts that he could reuse. He enjoyed fixing things. Machines, engines, broken tools, anything he could bring back to life. People said he had a strange habit of talking to machines while he repaired them, as if they understood him. But he liked working alone, and the quiet of the scrapyard made him feel calm. On this evening, he carried a small light with him and walked between the metal piles, searching for usable parts. As he moved, he suddenly froze. He heard something. A soft scraping sound. Something alive. He turned his light toward the noise, expecting maybe a small animal. Instead, he saw two glowing eyes looking back at him from under an engine shell. He didn't run or shout. He stood still, watching carefully. Slowly, the dragon stepped forward, weak and trembling. The human mechanic lowered his light and lifted both hands a little, not in fear, but in caution. He could see the creature was starving. Its ribs were visible. Its horns were crooked. Its wing hung strangely. But what caught his attention most was the look in its eyes. It didn't look aggressive. It looked scared, confused, and tired. The mechanic took a slow breath. He looked around to make sure no one else was there. Then he crouched down a bit, making himself look smaller so the creature wouldn't feel threatened. The dragon hesitated, unsure if it should stay or run. But it was too weak to run. It could only stand there. The mechanic spoke softly, his voice calm and gentle. He didn't try to move closer. He simply talked. He told the creature he wasn't there to hurt it. He talked as if the dragon could understand every word. Maybe it couldn't, but the tone mattered. The dragon lowered its head slightly. It didn't move away. The mechanic opened his tool bag and took out a small food pack he kept for long shifts. He pushed it carefully across the ground toward the creature. The dragon sniffed it. Then slowly, with clear hunger but also fear, it ate. When it finished, it looked back at the mechanic, unsure of what to expect next. The mechanic looked at the damaged wing and the thin body. He knew right away that the creature wouldn't survive long without help. It didn't matter to him that the creature wasn't perfect or beautiful. It didn't matter that the emperor had no use for it. What mattered was that it was alive and suffering. And he couldn't walk away from that dot. He whispered softly again, reassuring the creature that he was there. The dragon, sensing no danger, took a shaky step closer. And in that moment, something changed. The creature didn't feel completely alone anymore, and the mechanic felt a strange pull in his chest, a feeling he often got when he found something broken, but worth saving. The scrapyard, once silent and empty, now held the beginning of a bond that neither the human nor the dragon had expected. A bond that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could imagine yet. The mechanic stood there in the quiet scrapyard, unsure what he had just gotten himself into. He hadn't planned to rescue a creature that many people feared. He had only come for spare parts, nothing more. But seeing the dragon in that condition had stirred something inside him, something he couldn't ignore. The creature watched him with tired eyes, still unsure whether he was a friend or another threat. The mechanic understood fear like that. He had lived long enough on the colony to know what it felt like to be overlooked or pushed aside. He slowly sat on a broken piece of metal, keeping his distance so the dragon wouldn't feel cornered. The creature didn't move away this time. It simply lowered itself to the ground as if its strength had finally run out. The mechanic noticed its rough breathing and the way it leaned away from its injured wing. He could tell it was in pain. The wind blew across the scrapyard, carrying the smell of rust and old oil. A few loose metal plates rattled, but neither the mechanic nor the dragon reacted. They just stayed there, two beings who had never met before, but somehow understood each other in silence. After a long moment, the mechanic opened the small light again and gently pointed it at the creature's wing. He didn't go close. He only wanted to see the extent of the damage. The dragon flinched, but it didn't growl. That, to him, was a sign of trust. Or maybe just exhaustion. Either way, he wanted to help. He stood up and walked over to the pile of metal behind him. He found an old crate and dragged it over. The dragon tensed up again, but the mechanic kept talking softly so it wouldn't panic. He didn't say anything special, just simple things like telling it what he was doing or telling it not to worry. His voice was calm, carrying a warmth that stood out in the cold metal world around them. Inside the crate, he had some old fabric sheets and tools. He pulled out the cloth first. It wasn't new, but it was clean enough. Slowly, he approached the dragon, watching every movement it made. When he reached close enough, he stopped and sat on the ground, letting the creature see that he wasn't there to attack. The dragon looked at him with slow, blinking eyes. That small gesture surprised him. It meant the creature was trying to understand him, trying to decide if it should trust him. He gently placed the cloth on the ground and pushed it forward. The dragon sniffed it, then lowered its head again. The mechanic whispered, "It's all right. I'm just going to help." He extended his hand slowly. The dragon tensed but didn't pull away. Inch by inch, he moved his hand closer until he touched the creature's scales. They were rough and cold, not like the smooth, armor-like scales people described in stories. But he didn't care. He brushed his fingers lightly over its side, checking for injuries. The dragon let out a low sound, not aggressive, more like a tired sigh. When he reached the damaged wing, the creature flinched hard. He immediately pulled back. He didn't want to push too fast. Instead, he tried a different approach. He circled around and examined the wing without touching it. He noticed that one of the bones had grown differently, maybe from earth. The wing membrane was also torn in places, probably when workers dragged it roughly. He felt anger rise inside him, not at the creature, but at the people who had treated it like nothing. It wasn't the dragon's fault that it wasn't perfect. He knew many people, humans and aliens, who weren't perfect either. That didn't mean they didn't deserve care. He sighed and stood up again. The dragon watched him closely, but it didn't run or hide. He moved to the scrap piles and began searching. He looked for anything he could use to create a temporary support for the wing. It took a long time, and he made a lot of noise lifting old parts. Still, the creature didn't leave. Maybe it was too weak. Or maybe it sensed that he meant no harm. Finally, he returned with a few metal rods, a thin sheet, and a bundle of wiring. It didn't look like much, but he had repaired far worse machines with far fewer tools. He sat down and started shaping the rods into a curved frame, bending them with his hands and tools. Every now and then he spoke to the dragon, not because it needed to understand the words, but because it made the moment feel less lonely. The creature watched him work, its head resting on the ground, but its eyes following every movement. When he finished shaping the frame, he covered it with a thin sheet and secured it with the wiring. It looked like a small brace, rough but functional. He held it up and looked at the dragon. "This might help you move," he said softly. "I'll be careful." Slowly, very slowly, he moved toward the creature again. This time, he held the brace low, letting the dragon sniff it. It nudged the frame lightly with its nose. That was good enough for him. He took another deep breath and positioned the brace near the injured wing. The dragon tensed again, but it didn't pull away. He worked gently, lifting the wing slightly and sliding the brace under it. The creature let out a soft cry of discomfort, and the mechanic whispered apologies over and over until the sound faded. Once the brace was in place, he tied it loosely so it wouldn't hurt the dragon's skin. When he stepped back, the creature tested the wing by moving it slowly. The brace supported the wing, taking some pressure off the weak bone. The dragon tilted its head, almost surprised. The mechanic smiled softly, feeling a small sense of success. He spent the next hour cleaning the area around the creature, moving sharp pieces of metal away and clearing a small space where it could rest safely. The dragon watched him the whole time, its eyes becoming less fearful and more curious. When he finished, he placed a thick piece of cloth on the ground like a bed. He wasn't sure if the creature would use it, but he wanted to try. The night grew colder. The wind picked up, blowing dust everywhere. The mechanic knew he couldn't stay much longer, or else someone might notice he wasn't at his quarters. But before leaving, he walked back to the creature and crouched down again. "You'll be okay for tonight," he said softly. "I'll come back tomorrow." The dragon blinked slowly again. It didn't understand every word, but it understood the tone. The mechanic stood up and picked up his bag. He turned to leave, but before he walked away, he looked at the creature one last time. Got something about those tired eyes reached deep inside him. He had fixed countless machines in his life, but this creature didn't feel like a broken thing to repair. It felt like someone who needed a chance. As he walked back to his workshop, he kept thinking about the dragon. He thought about the way it had trusted him, even when it had every reason not to. He thought about the wing brace and whether it would hold until he returned. And he thought about the Emperor's decision to throw the creature away, as if it had no value. He reached his workshop and closed the door quietly. But even as he tried to sleep that night, the image of the creature lying in the scrapyard stayed in his mind. He promised himself he would return, not because he had to, but because the creature deserved better. And deep down, he knew this wasn't just an act of kindness anymore. It was the beginning of something he couldn't yet explain. The next morning came with a bright but hazy sky over the colony. The air hummed with the usual sound of machines starting their day. Workers moved around with little energy, dragging tools and supplies, while supervisors shouted orders from platforms. But the mechanic woke up before his alarm. Already thinking about the creature in the scrapyard, he quickly washed his face, grabbed some food packs, tools, and a canister of clean water, then slipped out quietly. He didn't want anyone asking why he was leaving so early. The fewer questions people asked, the easier it would be to help the creature without drawing attention. As he walked through the narrow, metal paths leading to the scrapyard, he kept hoping the dragon had survived the night. The cold could be harsh, especially for a creature that was already weak. He walked faster, almost jogging by the time he reached the broken fence that separated the yard from the workshops. When he stepped inside, the wind carried the familiar smell of rust and old machines. For a moment, he couldn't hear anything. No movement, no breathing, just silence. His chest tightened with worry. He moved deeper into the yard, weaving through piles of metal until he reached the spot where he had left the creature. The metal shell the dragon had used for shelter was still there, but the space around it was empty. He felt his heart drop. He set his bag down and looked around quickly, calling out softly, even though he wasn't sure the creature recognized human sounds. Then he heard a soft scrape behind a large engine block. He turned fast, and relief washed over him as he saw the creature slowly stepping into view. The dragon looked a little more alert today. Its eyes weren't as dull, and its head was lifted higher. The wing brace he had made was still tied around its wing, surprisingly holding up better than he expected. The creature walked with small, careful steps toward him. It paused a few feet away, waiting, watching him with a quiet curiosity. "You made it," he whispered, unable to hide the relief in his voice. He pulled out a food pack and opened it. The smell of warm nutrients filled the air as he pushed the pack toward the creature. This time, the dragon didn't hesitate. It moved closer and ate with more strength than the night before. The mechanic watched closely, noting how hungry it still was. When it finished the first pack, he gave it another, then a third. He filled a small metal tray with water and placed it near the creature. The dragon sniffed cautiously, then drank deeply. Its breathing softened afterward, as though the water eased something inside it. Once the creature finished eating, the mechanic approached slowly. He checked the brace again, making sure it hadn't slipped or caused irritation. The dragon didn't flinch this time. It stayed still, trusting him enough to let him inspect the wing. He felt a warmth in his chest. Strange how quickly the creature had learned to see him as something safe. After checking the brace, he gently stroked the dragon's side. The creature let out a low rumble, not threatening but soft, almost like a tired sigh. He smiled at that sound. "I want to help you heal," he said quietly. "But we'll have to work together." He wasn't sure why he said those words out loud, but they felt right. He noticed that although the creature was stronger today, it still kept its body tight, as if expecting pain at any moment. Its legs were shaky, and every movement seemed careful. He had seen that posture before, in wounded animals, and even in people who had been treated badly. The creature wasn't just physically hurt. It was afraid of the world around it. He needed to change that dot. He took out a small scanner from his bag, an old device he used to check machine alignment. He pointed it at the wing from a short distance. The dragon tensed at the sound, but he kept his voice soft and steady, telling it that everything was okay. The scanner beeped quietly and displayed a rough reading. The wing bone wasn't broken, but it had grown in the wrong direction. The membrane was torn in multiple places. It would never fully heal naturally, but with support and time, maybe it could still be used for gliding or balance. He sat back, thinking about his options. Fixing machines was one thing. Fixing a living creature was something much more delicate. But he couldn't walk away now, not after seeing how much the dragon wanted to survive. So he started small. He guided the creature to stand on a clearer patch of ground. The dragon followed slowly, dragging its tail across the dust. Once it stood in the open space, he stepped back and watched its posture, noticing how it kept its weight unevenly. The injured wing pulled its body off balance. He walked around, keeping a gentle voice, encouraging small movements. The dragon tried to follow his steps. It wasn't graceful. It stumbled a little, one foot slipping on a metal sheet. The mechanic hurried forward, steadying the creature with both hands. The dragon looked at him with wide eyes, surprised by the sudden contact. But it didn't back away. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, as if thanking him. "It's okay," he whispered again. "You're doing fine." He decided to create a cleaner area for the creature to stay in while he helped it recover. He spent hours clearing rusted parts, pushing broken shells aside, and shaping a small circle of safe ground. The dragon watched him, occasionally shifting its weight or adjusting its wing, but never moving far. It almost seemed like it didn't want him out of sight. When the area was ready, he brought over thicker fabric he had taken from his workshop, old insulation sheets that still held warmth. He spread them across the ground, creating a resting space. Then he looked at the creature and motioned toward the sheets. It tilted its head, unsure at first, but eventually walked forward. The ground felt softer, and the dragon slowly lowered itself onto the fabric, settling down comfortably for the first time in its life, Seeing that small improvement filled the mechanic with a quiet joy. He sat beside the creature, not touching it, just staying close so it knew it wasn't alone anymore. The dragon rested its head on the ground, but its eyes stayed half open, watching every move he made. Trust was there, but still fragile. He knew he had to build it bit by bit. He spent the next few hours talking to the creature, adjusting the brace slightly, feeding it small amounts throughout the day so it wouldn't get sick. When the wind grew strong, he shielded the creature with a large metal sheet placed against the scrap pile, making a wind block. The dragon seemed surprised at every new act of kindness, as if it had never received anything like it before. At one point, the creature nudged his shoulder lightly with its nose. The touch was gentle, but strong enough to make him pause. He turned toward it and saw something soft in its eyes, something almost like gratitude. He reached out carefully and rested a hand on its jaw. The dragon didn't pull away. It simply closed its eyes for a moment, accepting the touch. That moment stayed within as the sky began to darken. He realized he had spent almost the entire day with the creature. He didn't regret it, but he knew he had to return before anyone questioned his absence. He stood slowly, gathering his tools and leftover supplies. The dragon lifted its head, watching him closely. It didn't growl or panic, but there was a clear sadness in its eyes, as if it thought he might disappear forever. He crouched down one more time and gently pressed his hand against its side. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised. "I'm not leaving you." The dragon lowered its head again, accepting his words even if it didn't fully understand them. He walked out of the scrapyard, the sky now glowing faintly with evening light. As he left, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not the kind tied to machines or work. Something deeper, something he couldn't explain. Helping that creature felt right in a way nothing else had in years, and he had no idea that this was only the beginning of a bond that would change both their lives forever. The next few days were a mix of small victories and cautious progress. Each morning, the mechanic hurried to the scrapyard, bringing food, clean water, and whatever small tools he thought might help the creature recover. With every visit, the dragon grew slightly stronger. Its eyes became more alert, its movements more confident, and even the crooked wing began to respond to the brace he had made. At first, the dragon had been hesitant to leave its small patch of ground. It would crawl slowly toward him when he brought food, but only enough to eat, and then return to the same hiding spot. But as the mechanic spent more time with it, the creature started to explore the cleared area. It tested its legs, stretched its wings, and even let out soft, low sounds that seemed like a mixture of curiosity and cautious joy. The mechanic watched every movement closely. He knew that even small steps were important. He guided the dragon gently, encouraging it to try standing longer or moving in a wider circle. Sometimes the dragon stumbled and let out a soft cry of frustration, but the mechanic was always there to steady it, speaking softly, rubbing its sides, or adjusting the brace to make it more comfortable. One morning, as the sun filtered weakly through the dust in the colony sky, he noticed something remarkable. A dragon had lifted its injured wings slightly on its own. It didn't glide or fly, not yet, but it held it up, testing the strength. The brace supported it perfectly, giving the creature confidence it had never felt before. The mechanic's heart leapt at the sight. "You see?" he said, almost laughing softly. "You can do it. You really can." The dragon blinked slowly, as if it understood, and then lowered the wing again, resting it on the brace. The mechanic smiled, knowing that progress was slow but steady. This wasn't a machine he could fix in an hour. This was life itself, unpredictable, fragile, and beautiful in its own way. As the days passed, the mechanic continued to work in secret. The colony was busy, and most people ignored the scrapyard. Occasionally, A worker would glance his way and mutter something about a human spending too much time alone, but no one came close enough to see the dragon. The mechanic knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed, but he didn't care. His focus was on the creature in front of him. He began teaching the dragon small things. He showed it how to move around obstacles safely. He encouraged it to lift the wings slightly more each day to prepare for gliding when it was stronger. He even introduced simple exercises for its legs and tail, helping the creature regain balance and coordination. At first, the dragon was hesitant. Sometimes it would resist, flinching at his touch or backing away. But over time, it learned to trust him completely. One evening, while adjusting the brace and checking the creature's progress, a group of Imperial scouts arrived in the scrapyard unexpectedly. They were sent by the Emperor himself to inspect the discarded creatures. The mechanic froze. If they saw the dragon, they would likely confiscate it immediately. The dragon, sensing the tension, crouched low to the ground, muscles tense, ready to defend or flee. The scouts walked slowly, scanning the yard. They muttered about the mess and the broken parts. One of them pointed to a pile of old engines and mentioned the Emperor's disdain for wasted space. The mechanic quietly prayed they wouldn't notice anything unusual. But then, one of the scouts stepped closer to the dragon's resting area. His eyes widened as he saw the creature. The dragon lifted its head slightly, sensing the presence of strangers. The scout froze, staring at the crooked horns, the scarred scales, and the strangely shaped wing. He frowned, whispering to his companions. "It's supposed to be discarded," he said softly. "Why is it alive?" The mechanic stepped forward slowly, raising his hands in a calm gesture. "It was abandoned," he said. "I've been taking care of it. It's weak, but it's alive because it survived with care and attention." The scouts exchanged surprised glances. One of them reached for a communicator, but before he could call the Emperor, the dragon let out a low growl. It wasn't aggressive, but it was clear. It was warning them not to come closer. The human instinct and quiet determination in its posture startled the scouts. "This creature, it's responding to him," one scout muttered. "It's protecting him?" The mechanic nodded. "Yes, it trusts me, and I've been helping it develop. It has abilities you might not understand yet, but it's not just an outcast. It's alive, intelligent, and strong in its own way." The scouts looked at the dragon again. They saw it test its wing, flap it slightly, and balance better than before. For the first time, they realized the Emperor's judgment had been harsh. The creature wasn't ugly or useless. It had potential, but that potential had been unlocked only because of the human standing in front of it. After a long moment of silence, the scouts turned and left, muttering among themselves. The mechanic exhaled, relieved. He knelt next to the dragon, checking the brace once more. "You see?" He whispered. "They finally realized you're not just a mistake. You're amazing." The dragon nudged his hand lightly with its nose, a gesture that had become familiar over the past days. It had grown to trust him completely, showing that care and patience could build bonds stronger than fear or instinct. From that day on, the relationship between the mechanic and the dragon deepened. He began to experiment with small flights. At first, the dragon only flapped its wings slightly, lifting its body just an inch off the ground. Each attempt was followed by careful observation, adjustment of the brace, and gentle encouragement. The dragon stumbled, sometimes falling on its side or scraping its legs against the metal ground. But the mechanic never scolded it. He simply helped it up and tried again. The dragon responded to his patience. Its wings grew stronger. Its legs became steadier. It even began to explore areas of the scrapyard it had avoided before. Sometimes it would perch on top of old engines, testing its balance and surveying the yard. The mechanic watched with pride, knowing that every small achievement was a step toward full recovery. Word eventually reached the emperor about the dragon. He had expected to hear that it had perished, discarded like the others. Instead, reports described a creature that was alive, stronger than before, and bonded with a human. The emperor's curiosity was piqued. He wanted the creature brought to him immediately, unaware that the human and dragon had built a relationship that could not be broken by mere orders. When imperial officials finally arrived at the scrapyard with orders to seize the creature, they found something unexpected. The dragon stood tall, wings partially spread, tail coiled, and body tense. It growled softly but clearly, positioning itself between the mechanic and the officials. The creature's eyes glowed faintly in the fading light, a sign of strength the emperor's men had never anticipated. The human stood still, arms slightly raised, showing no aggression. "You can't take it from me," he said calmly. "It trusts me. It belongs with me. I've helped it survive and grow. You don't get to decide its value." The officials hesitated. They had never seen a discarded dragon defend someone with such clarity. The creature's behavior was intelligent, coordinated, and unmistakably protective. They realized that taking it by force could risk injury to both the human and the dragon. After a tense pause, the officials relayed the situation to the emperor. His face, sharp and unforgiving as always, showed surprise and irritation. He had never expected a human to challenge his judgment, and certainly never expected a creature he deemed useless to survive and thrive because of human care. The dragon, sensing the tension, remained close to the mechanic. It moved slightly, adjusting its stance, as if letting the emperor know it would not leave willingly. It was no longer the fragile, rejected creature from the breeding center. It had grown stronger, more confident, and fiercely loyal. The mechanic knew the real challenge was just beginning. The emperor had power and authority, but he could not understand the bond between a human and a creature that had been deemed worthless. And that bond, built through patience, care, and trust, could not be undone by threats or orders. The dragon's eyes met his, and in that silent connection, he knew one thing clearly. Together, they could face whatever came next. The emperor's mistake had been revealed, but the story was far from over. The morning sun rose over the colony, painting the metal towers with soft golden light. The air felt warmer than it had in weeks, and the sound of machines and workers in the distance reminded the mechanic that the world was moving forward, even in a place where creatures like the dragon were often overlooked. He carried his bag lightly, filled with food, clean water, and small tools. Today, he knew, would be important. He arrived at the scrapyard, heart racing slightly, hoping the dragon was ready for more progress. The creature had grown noticeably stronger in the past days. Its eyes were brighter, and it moved with more confidence than before. The brace on its wing had been adjusted and improved. It was now lighter, more flexible, allowing the dragon to test its wing with more freedom. The dragon greeted him in its own way. It stretched its wings slightly, then lowered its head and let out a low, rumbling sound. The mechanic smiled. "Good morning. Ready for today?" he asked softly. The dragon blinked slowly and took a small step forward. That was all the answer he needed. He had spent the previous night planning. The next step was the most daring yet, testing the dragon's ability to glide. He had cleared a small slope in the scrapyard, using old metal sheets and crates to form a gentle incline. It wasn't a tall drop, but it would be enough for the dragon to feel what it was like to lift its body using the brace and wings. He motioned for the dragon to approach the slope. The creature hesitated at first, legs stiff, tail brushing against the ground. The mechanic knelt down, speaking softly. "You don't have to do it perfectly. Just try. I'll be here." The dragon took a few careful steps, then stopped. Its eyes flicked toward him, seeking reassurance. He nodded, slowly clapping his hands to encourage it. The dragon shifted its weight, lifted its body slightly, and with a tentative flap, moved forward. The brace supported its wing perfectly. For a moment, it glided a short distance, landing softly on the metal surface below. The mechanic's heart leapt. "Yes, that's it. You did it," he said, laughing quietly, unable to hide his excitement. The dragon lifted its head, eyes wide, looking around at the slope as if surprised by its own ability. It tried again, this time a slightly longer glide, and landed more steadily. Each attempt gave it more confidence, and each small success filled the mechanic with pride. By midday, the dragon had attempted gliding several times. Each time it improved slightly. Its balance was better, its movements more controlled. The mechanic adjusted the brace here and there, tightened a strap, loosened another, and even added small padding to make it more comfortable. The creature accepted each adjustment without protest, trusting him completely now. The bond between them was undeniable. The dragon had survived alone in a world that had thrown it away, but it had learned to rely on the mechanic. And the mechanic had found a purpose beyond repairing machines. He had learned patience, empathy, and the quiet joy that comes from seeing life grow stronger under your care. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the scrapyard, the distant sound of imperial engines echoed through the colony. The emperor himself had sent a delegation, curious about reports of the discarded dragon that had not only survived, but seemed capable of unusual feats. The mechanic felt a surge of anxiety. He had prepared for this day, but could not predict how the emperor would react. When the imperial officials arrived, the dragon stood its ground, tail coiled, wings slightly spread. Its body radiated strength, and its eyes glowed faintly, showing the intelligence and determination that had developed under the mechanic's care. The humans leading the delegation were nervous. They had expected a weak, fragile creature, easy to reclaim. Instead, they saw a dragon alive, confident, and protective of its human guardian. The mechanic stepped forward calmly. "This creature is not discarded," he said. "It's alive, strong, and intelligent. It trusts me because I have cared for it. You can't simply take it away." One of the officials frowned. The emperor ordered it returned. "You are a human. You have no right to claim it." The mechanic shook his head. "I have rights because I've kept it alive, nurtured it, and helped it grow. It's not just a creature for display or weaponry. It's living, and it has chosen me as its guardian. You cannot override that." The officials exchanged uneasy glances. The dragon shifted slightly, stepping closer to the mechanic, tail brushing his legs. Its growl was low but unmistakable, a warning to anyone who might try to take it by force. The combination of the human's calm confidence and the dragon's protective stance created an unspoken power no official could ignore. Word of the encounter reached the emperor. He arrived personally, his expression sharp, eyes cold. He expected defiance, but also obedience. When he saw the dragon and the human together, he was taken aback. The creature wasn't weak, ugly, or useless. It stood tall, its body poised, wings braced, and eyes intelligent and alert. It had survived and grown stronger because of one human's care. The emperor stepped forward, voice echoing over the scrapyard. "Why is this creature not returned to the breeding program?" The mechanic stayed calm. "Because it is not a program or a tool. It's a living being. It has potential, yes, but not because of what you decided for it. Its potential was realized because it was given care, patience, and trust." The emperor studied the dragon carefully. The creature moved, testing its wing again, gliding slightly before landing softly beside the mechanic. It had grown strong enough to show control and intelligence. The emperor realized, perhaps for the first time, that his judgment had been hasty. This was no failure. This was a creature that had been misjudged. The dragon nudged the mechanic's side with its nose, as if signaling that it would not leave. The human stroked its scales gently, and the creature leaned into the touch, calm and confident. The emperor's expression softened slightly, though he remained proud and reserved. The mechanic continued, "This dragon belongs with me, not because I command it, but because it trusts me. It survived where it would have perished, and it grew because of human care. If you take it now, you will undo all that trust and progress." The emperor looked from the human to the dragon, and then at the officials. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "It seems my judgment was incomplete. The dragon may remain with its human guardian, but it will be observed and its progress reported to me." Relief washed over the mechanic. He exhaled slowly, kneeling beside the dragon and brushing its scales softly. The dragon nuzzled him gently in return. It was not just a creature anymore. It was a partner, a friend, a being that had learned to trust despite rejection. From that day forward, the dragon and the mechanic worked together. The dragon learned more about its strength and abilities, testing glides over longer distances, exploring areas beyond the scrapyard, and gaining confidence in its body. The mechanic continued to provide care, guidance, and support, teaching it how to navigate the world safely. The colony workers who had once whispered about the ugly, useless dragon began to watch in awe. They saw a creature once discarded now strong, loyal, and capable. They saw the human who had refused to give up, who had treated life with respect and care. And they realized the true value was not in appearance or initial judgment, but in what could be nurtured with patience and understanding. The dragon never left. The mechanic sighed, not because it was forced, but because it had chosen him. It had learned to trust, to rely on kindness, and to grow stronger with encouragement. And the mechanic had learned that even in a world of metal and machines, compassion and patience could create something far more remarkable than any tool or weapon. They became a symbol of hope in the colony, not for their power, not for their beauty, but for the bond they had formed. A human and a dragon, both once overlooked, both underestimated, had shown that care, trust, and determination could overcome rejection and fear. The dragon's wing grew stronger every day. It glided longer distances, lifted heavier loads, and even began exploring beyond the scrapyard, always returning to the mechanic's side. The colony slowly accepted the idea that this unusual partnership was something worth respecting, even if it had defied the emperor's original judgment. And in quiet moments, when the sun set behind the industrial towers and the wind carried the smell of metal and oil across the yard, the mechanic would sit beside the dragon, hand resting gently on its side, and they would watch the world together. Neither feared the future, because they had found strength in each other. The story of the dragon rejected for being too ugly had turned into something far greater than anyone could have expected. It was a story of survival, trust, and the extraordinary bond between a human who refused to give up and a creature who had never been given a chance. Together, they proved that worth is not defined by appearance or judgment, but by love, care, and the courage to believe in one another. And in that quiet scrapyard, among the broken machines and rusting metal, a human and a dragon found something that could never be discarded: each other.